melanated family? This is Harrison bringing you another episode of History Matters, where we explore the history behind the people, places, and situations from our past to get a clear understanding of how we are to move forward. Now, please do me a favor, family, and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you are new to the Melanated Fathers TV YouTube channel. Even if you aren't new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, please do so. So today, what we're going to talk about on History Matters is a racial or a race riot rather that took place in Chicago in the year 1919. So we're going to talk about the race riots of 1919 in the city of Chicago, Illinois. So let's get into it, family. Now, on July 27th, 1919, racial tension in Chicago created the scene for a race riot. Now, what basically happened is a 17-year-old black child named Eugene Williams was drowned at the 29th Street beach. And, keep it in mind, it was an extremely hot day, one of the hottest summers in Chicago's history at that time. Racial tension was high, like I said, because there was an influx of African-American people coming to the north from the south based on overt racism that they were going through there. So that mixed with the economy shifting based on all of these new black residents, the jobs for the current white residents began to dwindle. So all of this was all of this was going on at the same time when this took place, just to give you a little context. So what basically happened is he was stoned to death. And what happened was he was on the beach, and in that particular beach at that time, it was a segregated beach. It was a white side of the beach and a black side of the beach. So Eugene actually drifted over into the white side of the beach. Some white beach goers seen this take place. They began to throw rocks at him, eventually hitting him in his head, and the brother eventually drowned. Right now, things quickly escalated when police arrived, and they weren't in a rush to make an arrest even after black witnesses pointed out the white man who did the crime. Now, things took an even further turn for the worst when a frustrated black teen fired a shot into a crowd of police officers, killing one of them. Now, after that took place, this is pretty much what got the riots fully started, because exaggerated versions of the events that took place at the beach begin to circulate around the city, causing an already tense situation to escalate into an all-out race war. Now, at that point, white citizens began flooding the streets of the south side of Chicago, causing harm to any black citizen they can find. They would do this by throwing rocks at them. If they had a gun, they would shoot a gun, bats, whatever they can use to harm our people is what they were doing. And just to keep everything into context, the riots would last until August 3rd, 1919. Ultimately, the total number of people who were injured were 537, 2/3 of those people being black, 1/3 of them being white. 38 people died, 23 were black, 15 were white, with, between 1,000 and 2,000 people losing their homes. Keeping in mind, because this was on the south side of Chicago, most of the people who lost their homes were actually black people. Now, these events that took place in Chicago this summer was a part of a bigger problem that we were facing in our country at the time. It was a part of something dubbed the Red Summer, where not only in Chicago, but in Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Nebraska, Washington, D.C., race riots were going on pretty strong in all of these cities. And again, the antithesis for these race riots were pretty similar for all of the cities, meaning, like I was saying, an influx of new black citizens. World War I veterans were coming back from the war. and World War One veterans were coming back from the war, and if you were a black World War One veteran, you came back to a marginalized society where your people were still being disenfranchised and racism was still running rampant. If you were a white veteran, you came back to realize that most of the jobs that you would have been doing yourself was now being taken over by black citizens. So a lot of tension was in the air at the time. Like I was saying, a lot of blacks from the South were fleeing to the North based on the uprise of the KKK at the time. They were making a resurgence. Just to give you some information about that, in 1918, there were about 65 lynchings in the South. In 1919, it went up to 83 lynchings. So as you can see, the black population had reason to want to flee the South and do what's best for their family. Now, also, another one of the reasons why the Chicago riots were taking place, like I said, the influx of black people from the South. But just to give you some context about that, in Chicago, the black population in 1909 was 44,000. Well, by 1919, it was 100,000 black people in the city. And, most white citizens who were immigrants themselves, actually from Europe, they pretty much felt like this was like an invasion, because like I said, a lot of the jobs that they would normally work were being done now by black citizens. Let's see here. So also, yeah, like I was saying, the black veterans were coming back disappointed because of the injustices that they had to face. White veterans had issues with what they saw as well. On the political side of things, then President Woodrow Wilson didn't make anything better because he supported a lot of the racially motivated laws that kept black and white people segregated. Not to mention the newspapers at the time slanted a lot of the coverage to make it seem as if the black community were the protagonists in a lot of these riots, when in actuality it was based on white racism to a large degree. Now, this period of time, it's important that we talk about this period of time because there are some similarities to what we're going through now. So, for instance, in 1918, while they were, different race riots were going on, and the one I'm speaking about now was about to happen, the world was dealing with the H1N1 virus, better known as the Spanish flu. Now, it was estimated that during that pandemic, 500 million people worldwide was affected with the virus. About 50 million people died from it, and 675,000 of those people were from the United States. So, when we look at that time period, it's important that we understand that even though we've taken even though we've taken leaps in this country to make changes, when we look at, almost a little over 100 years ago where we were in this country, we were pretty much dealing with the same thing. Today we're dealing with pandemics. Today we're dealing with racial injustices. So, it almost feels as if the more things change, the more they stay the same. But one of the silver linings in the race riots in 1919 was, it's something that we need to understand. The black citizens in that city, in a lot of the cities around the country, they actually fought back. Like a lot of the World War One veterans came back to society, and they had skills in different things that they've learned, and they use those military technical the tactical information that they learned from being overseas. They would use that to help fight in the revolution. So in 1919, when the race riots were going on, black veterans were protecting black communities. When we look at pictures and images from these riots, we don't see that as much. But keep in mind, family, that the black populace at this point was beginning to be fed up with the overt racism that they had to face, and they began to understand that they can fight back and do what they needed to do to protect themselves. The white citizens at that time began to see the same thing because, like I said, black veterans, they were robbing armories and doing what they could to get the necessary weapons to protect our community. So I just want to make sure that we understand that even though we've come a long way and we have a long way to go. We are fighters, and we have been on the front line of a lot of important revolutions in this country, you know, and it's important that we understand that. So, you know, even though we still deal with bouts of racism today, I'm extremely confident that we're going to continue to do what's necessary to get ourselves out of this situation. So this is, and also the end result of those race riots, just so you know, I told you the amount of people who died, the amount of people who were injured. You know, most black people in Chicago around that time in the South Side lost their homes. When we look at Chicago today, it is still very segregated. They still go through a lot of these same things, and I think around that time period is when some of these things were set in motion, where it's heavily segregated in that city today. So we look at the crime in Chicago and how the black residents are treated, how the black residents are treating themselves now. You know, a lot of the motivation behind that and the history behind that started around this time period. So this has been another episode of History Matters. Again, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to Melanated Fathers TV so you can be updated when new videos like this one are released. Thank you guys for listening.